Good evening. We'd like to welcome you to the October 7th Arundel Camera Club meeting. This evening's meeting is a critique session with critique leader Greg Holden, whom we'll introduce to you in a little bit. But before we move to the critique, we want to take a look at the rest of October for Arundel Camera Club. This is our schedule for October. We have on October 9th a field trip to Gambrel State Park planned. On October 14th, a program with Chris Spielman, 20th. Really important evening is a Brian Baru fundraiser. There'll be more instructions about that later. On the 21st, we'll have a digital competition with the on that this coming week as we get ready for those submissions. Third, we have a field trip to Patuxent River Research Refuge. And then on the 28th, our program with Jonathan Newton, who's a Washington Post staff reporter. And at this point, I'm going to defer a second to Mike Thomas. Mike, is there anything that we missed there?
No, I think you've got all the big activities. We're going to send out an email tonight or tomorrow about the upcoming field trip to Gambrel State Park. I'll probably try and get it out tonight since it's this weekend. But other than that, I think it's there.
Okay. These critique evenings can be pretty long for folks, so I'm not going to take a lot of time with the preliminaries to make sure that give plenty of time to our photographers and to Greg Holden, our critique leader. This picture may look familiar to you. This is what the critique session was, what we had in mind when we originally started talking about this, which is basically you want to come in and bring your photographs into a meeting, sit them down on the table, and talk with other folks about what you have there, and particularly have somebody who is a critique leader, who's an expert photographer, and be able to give you some really good feedback on it. So that's sort of the model for it. Our critique sessions for this fall are September 9th, which we've already done with Jerry Taylor, September 7th with Greg this evening. On November 4th, we have another one, and on December 2nd, we have our last one for the fall. And from there, we're not quite sure where critiques will be in our future, but we shall see. A little bit on the setup for this evening. Basically, think of it this way. We got 6 photographers. Each one of them has 15 minutes with the critique leader. Each photographer can select any 4 photographers, any 4 photographs to discuss. And some people have selected these for various reasons. So there weren't any restraints on folks in any way, shape, or form. If there's time at the end of each of the 15-minute segment, if any of the other 5 photographers want to comment and we have time for those comments, we'll ask them to unmute and go ahead and go. But otherwise, we're going to dedicate and concentrate on the 15 minutes for the photographer who brought the images in. Now, for those of you who are on Facebook Live, you should be able to use the chat window there. And Bob Weber and Mike Thomas will be following those. And so if we have any comments that need to be brought in or any questions, that's the vehicle. So the cool thing about tonight is it's sort of a competition, but there are no winners, there are no ribbons, no losers, and no points. For the photographers, leave it on mute until it is your turn. And other than that, we should be pretty well ready to go to the next stage. Now, I want to introduce our critique leader, who doesn't really need an introduction for Arundel Camera Club. He's been with us numerous times as a speaker in person back in the day when he inhabited the Maryland area. Now he's living in Colorado and enjoying the wild outdoors. A picture of what he has behind him at this time. We particularly wanted Greg to be a part of this because he has always given us such clear and insightful feedback on many of our images in these contests when he served as a judge. But the problem with judging is you get 1 minute to get feedback and you don't have the opportunity, and Greg doesn't have the benefit of talking with you ask you questions about the image you tried to create when you did the picture. Greg shoots a lot of black and white, and he has some very interesting type of subjects, some abstracts, and some unusual natural project subjects that just make his photography stand out. He has a website called Images Underfoot, which says a whole lot about his type of photography. And I think if you have a chance, you should go and take a look at that. I really am happy that Greg was willing to take time and be with us this evening. Greg, do you have anything you want to say before we get started here then?
No, that was a great introduction. Yeah, just I mean, as you see from my website, I take photos of a variety of things, and I'm inspired by a variety of things, so I try to be pretty well-rounded. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing some thoughts with the photos tonight.
Okay, well, that being said, we're going to go first to John Verdi, who's our first member, our first victim. So, John, you can unmute yourself. And I'm going to start my timer here. I actually am going to pay attention to timing so that we have 15 minutes, and I'm going to keep my mouth shut as much of that time as possible. So as if this were a contest, we're going to put the pictures up for you to everybody to take a look at them for a minute or two, and for Greg to take a look at it. And Greg, when you're ready, you can go ahead and get started.
Sure. So let me just talk about this chart with the 4 photos showing for a minute, and then we can go individually into them in a little more detail. So what I liked about John's work, one, is varied, some of his subject matter here, but he uses a lot of negative space in his photos. And I think it's worked really well in some photos, better than other photos. And so we can dive into that. But there's definitely something a lot of photographers don't take advantage of, is that negative space. So let's just go into the individual photos. So this one was clever. You kind of take a minute to try to figure out what's going on here. It looks like you maybe looking through water or something like that. I love abstract images, and this is a really good example. I like the colors, the green versus the brown, and the little highlights we're getting from the light reflecting off the water or whatever. My only comment about this is, when you do these kind of abstracts, I like to try to find some order in the chaos of the abstract. And I think John's done a good job here in trying to find some order by putting that kind of square of the green algae around that central rock formation there in the middle. But I wonder if there might have been a better composition that maybe where that's not dead center, and maybe we have either a little wider shot, or maybe the lines are more on an angle instead of all squared up. Because usually when you have abstracts, you want to really kind of just take it all abstract. And so when we start having squared up lines on an abstract, that it kind of, to me, makes too much order into the chaos. But John, do you have any comments on why you framed it up this way? I mean, it's a good image as is, but I think there's room for improvement.
Yeah, no, I don't have. I mean, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. It is flowing water. There are no rocks, and that isn't algae. It's just what the light did. This was just the background of it. I was in Freiburg, Germany, a couple of summers ago, and in the old part of town, they have these what used to be open sewers, which are now just with water running. The sun was shining, and I stood over one and took this. I can't even say that this is what I saw when I took the picture, but this is what came out of it. So it's exactly how the squares happened. It had to do, I think, with the way the water was flowing and the depth of the water and the light being reflected. So there's no algae, no rocks. It was just a smooth concrete surface underneath. That was kind of startled me when I saw this. But as far as framing, I think you're absolutely right. It came out like this. There really wasn't much room. If I was going to take that square, the rectangle off center, I'd have to cut what you see. I mean, this is what I had. I didn't have much.
And you don't want to go, too. I mean, you have some great detail in there in the brown areas. I think for me, seeing on the right side of the frame, we have this bit of green kind of going up the whole side of the frame, and we don't really see that on the other edges of the frame. So to me, it kind of bookends it a little bit, and my eye wants to be driven to the right side of the frame where there's kind of an anchor with that thing versus having that either all the way around or chopped off, so it's just a tic-tac-toe board kind of look. So yeah, I'd see if you can play around it, maybe even just rotating at a slight angle just might add just another element to it.
Yeah, so I was just thinking as you were talking, so that's one possibility. What about rotating it clockwise 90 degrees so that what's on the right is on the bottom? It wouldn't change the central focus, but it would change. I don't know if that would help. It might look more like a base than.
Right. Yeah, you could try that. Yeah, I tried with some different rotations. A lot of times when I do my abstracts, I'll do that. I'll take the photo and I'll say, what does this look like on its side? What does it look like if I mirror flip it? And try different orientations, because usually your mind has captured something really unique here. I think it's just a matter of how best to display it.
All right, good. Yeah, that's.
All right, let's move on. Go ahead. Let's move on to the next one. So this one's really interesting. This is one of your other photos, along with your other photos, I was mentioned about negative space. So for those who aren't familiar with that term, negative space is just, think of it as kind of a blank area in the frame of the image where there's not a lot of interest going on. And so here in this case, we have these two statue heads at the bottom, and then the rectangular box that the one statue head's on, really kind of anchoring that image to the bottom there. And although you have the pillar in the top 60% of the image, there's not a lot to it. So it's kind of negative space, which I think in this case plays really nice with what John has done here, where we have the one larger head and it's half in shadow, and that creates some visual interest just on its own. And I have this strong column that's kind of leading my eye up away from that, up towards the top of the image, which normally might be problematic, but including that second smaller statue head in the lower right helps kind of circle my eyes back down to the bottom. And I like to kind of play in scale that's been created here with that small head in the background. And I think if you didn't have that second figurehead in the background, you'd really be just running off the page with this image, because that column is so bright compared to the statue face that I'd see the statue because it's the sharpest part of the image, and then my eye would immediately be driven northward and off the page. But having that second head not only creates some visual interest, it really keeps my kind of eye circling the frame. Although I would, when you use negative space, you kind of want to think like, what is your subject, and how much is that? How much negative space is enough? And this is something I struggle with a lot. Is it you want 30% of your image to be negative space, 60%? It can vary different images. And in this case, it's almost like about 55, maybe 60% of the image is that top kind of what I call negative space. I wonder if that's maybe a tad too much. I wouldn't crop super tight, because I think the column creates a great counterpoint to the figure, but I maybe cop off maybe the top 10% of the image, just to maybe make it more of a 4x5 framing instead of a 2x3. John, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. The two shadows that are on the column, right, in the upper going, and then lower, I guess I thought they were important in the image too. And if I cropped from the top, I'd lose that upper shadow. Now, I don't know.
I like the lower shadow, because you kind of follow the shadow. It's sort of an arch shape. And so the lower shadow points your eyes to that smaller statue head. And so I think that's an important visual element here. It's subtle. You don't necessarily catch it right away, but to me, I feel it's helping lead my eye to that statue. Versus the one at the top is just, kind of cutting off the corner. I don't think that one is as important. In fact, if you kind of cover your hand up with it, like I'm doing now, I think that will leave the top of your frame of that column just bright white, which
Right.
will really emphasize that contrast to the kind of off-white color of the statue. So you might play with that. I wouldn't take off a lot off the top, but I think just a little bit, just to make your focus really your statues. But
Yeah, no,
very interesting.
yeah.
So
No, I see what
what
you're
was
saying.
your thought when you?
Well,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
yeah, so the background is at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. There is a big hall. One of the big halls is filled with these Greek and Roman statues. And I was up there one day, and I just came into the hall, and I was just, it was just wonderful to see it. The light was good. It was late afternoon, but the light was streaming in. And I just took a few. I have some others as well, but this one, because of the two heads, I thought made sense. There was also, when I finally looked at it, and I don't know how, to be honest, how interested I am in this as a topic, but there's a gender issue here.
Okay.
Right? Because the big head is female and the small head, I think you can tell, is male.
Right.
There's something dominant about the female image.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things I really liked about this, that you can really interpret this image in a lot of different ways. It's very graphical in some of its, lines and the lighting. We're playing with counterpoint with the scaling there. And then, the gender, the mom head, as it could be, as looking off frame, and I kind of see it as a boy just because he's smaller and in the background. Is he being punished, or is he, in the shadow of mom? So you can definitely read a lot into this image, which really adds a lot of characters. So really good seeing on this one in composition.
Good. Yeah.
Well, let's move on to the next image.
I want to say one more thing about that one. It also blows up well in prints. I don't get, I don't have a fancy camera. And so I have to worry when I blow something up if it's going to pixelate everywhere. But this one, maybe because of all the negative space, doesn't do that. So I've been able to make fairly large prints of it, which I'm satisfied with. But I'll definitely play around with the top. I think that's a really good idea.
Okay, great. Well, excellent. And then, here's another one kind of example where the right side of the image is a lot of negative space, but we have enough visual elements there to kind of ties it all together. And one of my favorite parts of this image, and something obviously you couldn't control, but is that cable dangling from the top of the frame. Kind of creates that wave that just allows my eyes to kind of flow through the image. Obviously immediately I'm drawn to the gentleman in the center. He's framed up in the light. We got the blue sign behind him, and my eye goes there. And then you see, well, where is he looking? And he's looking off. You see this other gentleman coming to frame. You've caught him. You're perfectly framed in that rectangle there. And so I think a lot of photographers would be tempted to just crop this as a square and maybe crop it just around the two gentlemen, just so it says 51st ST or something like that. And I think that would be a mistake. I think, John, you really did a great job of including this rest of this frame to give kind of just space to the image, space to the characters. And then just kind of, we have the one character here on the left coming in the frame, but then there's not one on the right. Again, you can try to read into that a little bit more about no one there and then someone there. And the colors are just really nice. So just really excellent composition, just idea. And again, another image you really can just sit there and stare and kind of think about what's going on here. And then, of course, you go into the whole gender and race thing. We got the older white gentleman and what appears to be maybe a middle-aged or younger black gentleman. You can read into that what you want. Just really, really interesting, excellent photo, John.
So let me, again, it's New York City, obviously. My daughter suggested I call this Parallel Lives, which is, in other words, parallel lives intersect at 51st Street, but which I thought made a lot of sense. Now, I did have one question.
Sure.
Just go back to that one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the little blur in the guy on the left, I couldn't.
Right.
So he's obviously in motion. For a while, I thought, could I, you know, could I kind of get rid of that blur? And then finally, I just said no, I can't. And I didn't know if it hurt the picture or he's
No,
obviously.
I think it helps the picture because it creates yet another element of difference between the two characters, right? We have the gentleman in the suit. He's static. He's in a very, static pose. And then the gentleman on the right with the motion, I think that is key. I think if you had frozen it at, a thousandth of a second, it would impart a slightly subtler, different feel to it. And I think having that blurred leg, showing he's moving, showing he's not paying attention to the other gentleman, he's just moving about his day. I think that really adds to it. So I don't think having that frozen would have given you the same impact.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't know how much to work on something.
Right.
This one basically, all I did was crop it so that the two columns on the the right and left were more or less the same. And then the picture's a little bit bigger, but not much bigger, and just tried to shape it up so that there were parallel lines everywhere.
Sure.
That was the idea of it.
All right, well, let's move on to the next one. I know Ron's watching my time. So this one, it's interesting. This one comes right after the subway one. This one I didn't feel was as successful as some of your other images. We have a lot of space to the left of the image. Again, we're in this negative space. And to me, this one has like a lot of nice elements to it, like the checkered floor leading to this white brick kind of centerpiece. And with the double doors on the left. And this one, I just felt it didn't quite work. And I saw your title, heading back to work. You kind of see the woman coming into frame. And my first thought was, okay, it's kind of a decisive moment. You got her in a good position, kind of striding in the frame. But she takes up such a small amount of the frame. And that can be effective sometimes. But I think in this, I didn't feel the negative space on the left with the doors and very sharp focus. I didn't see that point counterpoint like we were seeing in the last image. Mm-hmm. So I almost feel like you need to crop in a lot tighter and lob off that left side of the frame so it's kind of focused on her. And then, of course, if you zoom in tighter, you see that there's a sign on the back wall. It says ladies' room. So maybe this lady is, just coming out of the bathroom and going back to her desk. And to me, that kind of felt like a little creepy, like I'm watching someone coming out of a ladies' room. So it just, to me, there's just a lot of elements that just didn't really come together compared to especially the subway photo.
Yeah, all of that makes sense. And if I didn't expect her to come out. This was supposed to be just of this. I have other pictures of this peculiar, this hallway. She came out at that time. And what I would have liked to have been able to do, but I don't see how I could have done it, is crop out the whole door section on the left and square it up with the end of the bricks. But the door and the bricks overlap. The angle isn't quite right. I guess if I cropped it up to the left column, but then somehow I lose the sense of the size of that brick base.
But what if you just cropped it from the top down to the top of those bricks, eliminating the columns and most of the door, and then, of course, most of the woman as well. And then it's a kind of white square with all the checkers leading to it, kind of the leading line. That would make it interesting abstract.
Yeah, so, I could do that. I have a couple in this hallway. There are some water fountains off to the right, and I have a couple of the fountains looking down that somehow gather that together. But I could try it that way. I don't think, frankly, I don't think there's a lot I can do with this. That's one of the reasons I wanted to include it. I just want to,
Yeah, it's one of these things I think you need to think about. What was your goal with this photo? Was it to capture a Cartier-Bresson, decisive moment with a woman coming out? If so, then you need her to be a little bit bigger in the frame so it's a little more obvious. If you're looking at just lines and graphics, then you don't need the woman. You probably don't need the lights on the ceiling. If you're going for an interior architectural thing, I think you need to be a little bit wider and show a little bit more of the left side of the frame. So I kind of call this one an in-between. It's not quite zoomed in enough or not quite wide enough.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think you need to make a decision. What's your goal with the image, and then refocus on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. And as I say, with some of the other pictures in this hallway, I was a little more satisfied. But there was something about the woman. She's looking right at the camera too, and she's obviously in motion. I just thought, she was kind of neat, but the angle is not quite. It's not really of her.
Yeah.
I think, and it's not of the hallway because she's there. So
yeah, I think for this image, I think you at least have to crop off the left side, lose one of the doors, and crop off about half of that wall on the right, and then maybe take off a little bit of the ceiling, maybe the ceiling all the way to the columns.
Yeah,
where the columns start, and just really kind of come in a bit tighter, so we kind of see her walking into the space, and just not as a photo bomber in the back as she appears now.
Right. No, I can try that. I'm not sure how much I want to work on this one, but I thought I'd include it because I didn't think it was.
Yeah.
Of all of these, I do like the Greek statue and the subway. Mm-hmm. Those two, I think.
Yeah.
They say something, and this one, I don't know what it says.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're not sure what it says, then that's when you try to play with a different crop or just play with a different image. That's how I usually approach that.
Good. Thank you. That's helpful.
John, thank you for bringing those pictures in. I think that they're perfect ones to start off the evening because it's such a nice range of that, and some good, rich feedback from Greg on that. We're running a little close on the time, but I thought I should check with Mike and Bob to see if there's anybody that had any comments we needed to inject before we get on to Lewis.
Scott Dine suggested a bit of dodging might separate the woman from the background in this latest image.
Okay.
Yeah, if she's a little brighter, she might pop out a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's take a look at Lewis. Lewis did not have an opportunity to talk the last time we did this, so we had an opening and asked him to come back in, and he brought a lot of color along with him. So let's take a look at these, and then Greg, I'll turn that over to you.
Sure. Yeah, really nice assortment here. I think Ron hit the nail on the head there with color. Obviously, color play, especially in the images on the left. Color is an essential part of the image. But yeah, let's go through these. This is a good.
Hang on 1 second. Is
sure.
Lewis, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Okay, now I see him. All right, great.
All
Go
right.
ahead. I'm sorry, Greg.
All right, just go on to the next image. So I love these kind of graphic images, taken at a car show or something like that. So this one, it's all about just lines and shapes. And so, when you take these kinds of images, you really want to be looking around your whole frame and making sure only the lines that support your kind of graphic you're going to are included and everything else is excluded. And this is really good. I like the lighting on this. I love the graphic patterns it's creating. It's not exactly squared off as far as, kind of getting that Chevrolet dead center. Looks like this, I guess there are probably lights on either side of the grill, maybe a smidgen off. But the thing for me that's distracting is these two holes in the fenders at the bottom, these two little vertical slits. I don't feel that those add to the image. We have
I
wonderful.
I think I kind of agree with you now that I notice it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's we have these wonderful swooped lines, curved lines in the center, and then they're subdivided by the Chevrolet with a bit of chrome there, and that's nice. We got these curves on either side of the front fenders leading off, kind of framing it out really nice, a nice little kind of V kind of being formed. And then as my eyes follow down, they kind of go into these black holes. And I think that they don't add anything to the picture. I would either clone them out and leave that as just blank space there to kind of offset the grill, or you could just crop them out. But if you crop them out, then you start to lose a little bit of that dead space, that negative space on either side. That's a great framing.
Yeah, I
but you
think I
might
would.
try either or.
Yeah, I think I would rather clone them out. Also, while I'm looking at this, I noticed it's slightly askew, just leaning a tiny bit, which I never really
Yeah, it's
noticed
about
before.
like 10% leaning to the right kind of
Yeah,
thing. So
yeah.
yeah, in Adobe Lightroom or whatever tool you use, it's pretty easy to just draw the ruler in Lightroom and kind of square that up. But I mean, it's pretty close. I think it's just off by a little bit, but mainly those black lines. And so kind of like what we were talking about in some of John's photos, you think about when you're doing something graphic like this, every element is important, and how does that play in? So even at the top where we have the bit of the hood is open, and even though they're a different kind of, there's a bit of a reflection on them, they're a different shape of sorts than the rest of it, they work all right because it's still a curve to those lines, which kind of mimics the curve of the grill. So I think that adds a nice little interesting element at the top of the photo. And it's cropped just perfectly up there. But yeah, just those slits at the bottom, I think is the only problem there. But
Okay,
otherwise,
I agree with you on
neat
that.
graphic.
Yeah.
Let's go next one. So playing with the yellow theme. So this was kind of neat with this kind of low key image, and it's like a little bit like almost sunlight, peeking in on these flowers. So this was, I like this with this composition, this kind of low key image. People have the tendency to always photograph photos just in full light, just very bright and pretty. And so I like that you took a kind of a different approach to showing the buds and showing them in kind of a lower lighting situation where we just have almost a little bit of rim light on some of those petals. I'm guessing a lot of that was probably done in post-processing, but you've done a good job there. Just creates a really nice palette of yellow colors, very pleasing to look at. To me, the one distraction is down here in the left corner, this one leaf here that's kind of jutting out, kind of cutting off the corner. I would just clone that out or just tone it down, way down, so it doesn't pull my eye there. I'd rather just have just plain negative space on the left, because those flowers are leaning a little bit to the left, and it's okay they're not leaning into anything, which is good. But I think that thing down in the corner is a little problematic. But the rest of it, it's nice. Was this an arrangement you did in a studio, or is this at a garden somewhere?
This was created in a light box, and the only light I used was one of these LED lights that you put on. I had it on top of the light box, and I pushed it forward, and so it just lit up the front tulips there, and the rest of it just kind of worked out. I agree about that leaf down there on the left side, though. That is, when I look at it, it's really not that good. I think I thought about it actually taking it out, but I don't. In a way, I kind of thought it balanced it out. So whatever. But I like the image. I think it worked out quite well, really. And the light box helps because I don't have that much place. In the back is a black velvet as a background. And I was shooting for a kind of a darker image anyway, with something to pop out of the darkness.
Right. Yeah, no, like I said, it's a very kind of original take. So, let's go on to the next one. So this one looks like it's more taken outside, given the background. You've done a good job here, kind of controlling that background as best you can by keeping a shallow depth of field and blurring that out. Obviously, the colors on this leaf are real impressive, really pop out with those bits of yellow and green, kind of almost looks a little iridescent, kind of shiny. So that's really nice. This really interesting looking leaf. And then with the purple, stem, adds just yet another interesting element to it. I'm not really a big fan of the other leaf at the top, kind of poking in and photobombing the image. I think that takes away. Ideally, I would probably just do a combination of cloning out that biggest leaf on the right and then cropping in just a little tighter. I don't think you need it. I don't think it adds to the image. I think we all have seen leaves in nature. We know there's other leaves to this plant. It's not a single leaf plant. So I don't need that to tell the story. And I think you have a really good graphic here with this center flower. And so you want to make sure nothing is detracting you from that. I don't want really any other colors to pull my eye away from this beautiful leaf.
Yeah, this was taken outside a little while ago on actually a pretty cruddy gray day. I did, if I remember, I tried to burn down the upper leaf in the upper left-hand corner because it did bother me a little bit. Actually, the colors are coming from, I was working in Photoshop and I was actually boosting individual colors and to see how it came out. The real leaf doesn't look anything like that. So this is more like an artistic creation, of the leaf. But I kind of saw the pattern and the angles, and I just thought I'd give it a shot.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. And I would just desaturate entirely that leaf in the upper left would just keep all the color here at the bottom of the image. Would be good. And you have a few white kind of distracting lines at the bottom. You might try to turn those down a little bit, but they're out of focus enough, and the leaf is pretty enough that it's not a huge takeaway.
Yeah, I see something in the lower right that could be burned down a little bit, and over on the left a little bit, since you mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah, but very interesting to create work with the color palette, the color channels.
Yeah, it was color
create
channels,
your own
I think.
image.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very neat. So this one's interesting. I couldn't figure out if this was something you created or it's a picture of a work of art, but very interesting with this, checkered pattern and this kind of abstract image behind it. So it's framed. So is this something you created, or is this?
Well, this is a long story. I'll try to make it short. But you lived in Annapolis, so you're familiar with the city dock. And looking across the Severn, there's that restaurant with the windows. I don't know if you can recall that.
Right.
Okay,
I recall.
what I was doing, I was just trying to test my image stabilization in my lens and in my camera body to see how well it worked. But anyway, after a lot of fooling around, I think I just kind of came up with just the windows, in an abstract without all that background. So I was experimenting in Photoshop, and I was looking at combining images and stuff. So actually that background stuff that's in back of the windows, I actually don't know where they came from. I don't remember, but I played a lot with that to try and get a focal point. And if you look at the top, you see the little star in the one window and the circle.
Right.
So because my wife is an artist, she said, well, that's nice, but there's nowhere to really look. You're just kind of wandering all over the place. So that I worked that in somehow. But I was kind of really happy with it. And I boosted the colors, to bring it all out and everything. So I think it worked out pretty well.
I really like it because the lower left, it's a darker part of the image. So that kind of, you're creating a bit of a vignette with some of the brighter colors kind of in the middle of the frame, and the edges are a bit darker. We have these kind of white areas in the lower right frame and the second from left frame that really draw my eye up towards that circle and that little star element. And then we got some type of brown thing. And it's just something you could stare at for a while to try to figure out, what is this? Is this just a total abstract, or is it just a blurred image of something? And just the colors are real pleasing and really kind of just bounce your eye around the image. So very interesting composite. I like it.
I think I spent a lot of time on it back and forth, probably over a couple of weeks, just looking at it and then going back and, well, let's see about this and that. And so that's what I came up with. I thought it's kind of different from what I do, but I'm actually just working on learning on Photoshop for the 10th time. So, some of the tutorials, I try to apply some of them to what I'm taking. So I'm happy with it. It's pretty much like an abstract sitting in a modern art thing or something like that, get on the wall. So I kind of like it. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's very good. I'm curious if anyone else in the chat has any comments on this one. I know this is not something for everyone, these kinds of abstracts, but
some like it.
Really well done. Yeah, it's well done though.
Okay. Mike or Bob, anything from the Facebook chat that we need to drop in?
Scott Dine says those two black marks, aren't we nitpicking? The world isn't perfect. I think that refers to the Chevrolet grill picture.
Yeah, but when you're doing macro, or in that case, a graphic, I I think it's all fair game. You're really focused in on something, and I think you do have to clean up the edges and make it perfect as a graphic. Especially something like this, you're at a car show and probably have time to, keep your frame, to change your framing or just changing something. I mean, it's something for everyone, right? Some people are purists and they don't feel the need to clean up a little bits and bots.
Actually, what bothers me about it is the little part of the fender on the left doesn't match the little part of the fender on the right. It doesn't have that yellow thing in there. But I don't know what the restrictions were in the original. Actually, this was, I think, put in a contest a couple years ago, and that was some of the comments that the left and the right don't really match up, et cetera, But I just thought it was fun. There was a lot of cars like that. I think I have about 6 or 7 of the different cars that are similar. But yeah, I like it. It's fun. Something to look at,
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments? We actually are in pretty good shape with time at this point. All right. Well, let's walk on past Lewis's images and take a look at Susan Weber. Bob, can you locate your spousal unit and see if she'd like to join us?
I'm here.
Oh, there she
right.
is. Great. Hi, Sue.
Hi.
All right, so this is an interesting assortment. A lot of these photos kind of made me think a little bit about what was the intention, what was the photographer going for. So let's go through one by one. I'll share some of my thoughts. I think some of these were more successful than others. I'm curious to hear what Susan was thinking. So this one, where you're taking a picture of this architecture, and I guess this one I wasn't quite sure what the photographer was going for here, Susan. It's interesting. We have the curved little part of the building there against all the square lines of the rest of them. But I was kind of confused as what was the focus of this image? What was she trying to capture? Was it just this interesting curved architecture amidst all the straight lines around it? And if so, I think the bottom of the image with the trees and the bright lights probably not necessary. Probably could have cropped in a little differently. So, Susan, I'm curious what you're going for when you saw this image.
Well, it was visiting someone at University of Maryland Hospital, and it's the first time I've ever seen that atrium. So knowing we have an architecture theme coming up later this year, I just grabbed what I could and just want to know what to work with it. We also have an abstract theme coming up. So the possibility of cropping it and repeating it.
Yeah, I think to improve this image, I would crop off the entire bottom section where the trees and the bright lights are. So I would basically bring the bottom of the image right to that first curve. Because those bright lights at the bottom of the trees really just don't complement the curves in the architecture. So, and those bright white, so those floodlights or whatever are a bit distracting. So I think that's all unnecessary. So I'd take off the bottom, 15% of the image and just bring it right to that first curve or that first office or whatever it is. And I like the blue at the top, kind of looking out into the sky. I think that complements against the white. Nice, kind of makes it like a sky. I don't know if that's just the color, that's just the nighttime light. But that's kind of nice. I think this one is one where you don't need to show all 7 layers of this curved architecture. I would just crop in a bit tighter, take off that bottom. I think the red brick on the right is a nice kind of counterpoint to it. I don't necessarily think you need this structure on the left. I'm not sure that's really adding to it. Obviously you're getting tons of keystoning because everything's going to an angle because you're looking up so high. If you could straighten that a little bit, it doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but straighten your keystoning effect a little bit, that might help. But I think mainly you just need to go in a little bit tighter. Does that work?
Okay.
So, but interesting, it's one of my things, you may have heard this in past times I've judged or spoke. when you're taking a picture of someone else's architecture, someone else's design is right. It's someone else's art. When I do that, which is rare, I usually think of it one of two ways. Am I one trying to capture the complete architecture that this person has put together to highlight the wonderful design that they've come up with, or B, and which is where I think you were going, how can I abstract this and create a new image out of someone else's art? And so if you're creating a new image out of someone else's art, I tend to go in a lot tighter and really show just a segment of the art, in this case, the architecture. So to try and make it your own unique vision and not just a photo of someone else's design.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, can I take a quick second while we're at it?
Sure.
Sue, on this particular picture, and I've seen this particular feature a whole lot of times there, and it's always seemed so really interesting. But did you have a particular feeling or a story or something about something that you wanted to say with this picture?
No, I just wanted to grab it. I was hoping to come back actually with the camera. This was just the cell phone. I was thinking I'd bring the camera back and actually work on a more serious capture.
Okay.
But in the stress of all the back and forth to the hospital over a week, it just didn't happen.
Right. Well,
I'd never been there, and I thought it was absolutely fabulous view. And at the very least, I captured it because it was an image of what I saw.
Well, because it's in the lobby, I know this building pretty well, but I always thought it was an unusual feature in the side of this building, knowing it's a medical care and see all the medical people moving about at the bottom. It seemed like it had a almost kind of a interesting feel to it, almost sterile because of the white, almost mechanical. Yet it was about a building that was about trying to care for people. So that's why I was just wondering if any of that was going through your mind when you did that.
No, I didn't. My brain didn't get that far.
Okay, totally understand. Totally.
All right.
Okay. Well, sorry to jump in there. Greg,
No, that's good.
On to the next.
Well, actually, Ron, that was an awesome segue to this photo, where this photo, I had that exact same thought about what was the feeling that the person was trying to convey here. Because, we have part of a word down here, and I can kind of quickly summarize that surmise that it was emergency room. So someone is inside the hospital, they're looking out through the window, they're in the emergency area. So usually you don't go to the emergency area for good things. Occasionally there's a baby being born, but usually you're there for not so good things, and very stressful, having been there myself at the emergency room. So that was what kind of my thought when I first saw this. And I saw the emergency sign. It's shaded by this blind or whatever that's in front of it. So it's really invoking a lot of what was the photographer thinking? Were they trying to imply something with the shade drawn over the emergency where I'm not getting a clear view of the outside, and I'm inside the emergency room, I'm looking out at the rest of the world. And I don't know if, Susan, you were thinking that much into it when you were composing this and taking this image, if those thoughts were going through your mind. Was any of that in your mind, or?
No, I was initially at a different window that didn't have the blind effect. It had more of a grid. And I was watching the men working across the way, and I couldn't quite capture. Somebody climbed up that ladder with something hanging off his shoulder. I really wanted to grab the man on the ladder. So watching the men work, and I thought, well, let's see what other windows give me a different view. And then I loved having the lettering at the bottom. So again, it should probably turn into an abstract rather than a clear image.
Yeah, so I think, hearing now your description, and that was going to be my next comment, was about the workers in the background, is I feel like you've captured two different images that don't necessarily go together. In that one image, you're capturing the workers, they're building something, you're kind of watching from afar. It's more of a photojournalism kind of thing. But then the lower half of the image with the emergency and the screen in front of it, I think really imparts a totally different idea. It's not photojournalism. It's really more, you're trying to invoke some sort of feeling or some interpretation of emergency room. And so I kind of feel like the top half is one picture and the bottom half is a different picture. And so I almost wonder if you got to choose, is this a photo of the workers shot through this kind of screen where they're you have to kind of think about what they're doing? Or is it a photo of someone in the emergency room looking out and being blinded by the shade and not be able to see the rest of the world? And maybe that's what they're feeling in the emergency room, that they're not getting the full picture. They're left waiting for the doctors. I know we're going really in depth here to psychology 101 or 201, but yeah, I kind of feel like I'm like, what am I looking at? Like if the emergency room, if this image was looking out onto just a plain tree or some flowers or some bright sun, it would play off that emotion of looking out for something else. But looking out at the construction workers just doesn't jive with the emergency room thing.
If I cropped it in half, took away the top half of the building where the men are working, is there anything left in the remaining image that's worth working?
Right. So that's the problem, right? Because you're looking out, and what are you looking out past the emergency to? Some construction equipment, some potted plants. It's an interesting perspective, but yeah, I think you would need something different in the bottom. Maybe some people or some solitary something to play off. So I think it's one of these things where you saw, maybe with your mind, you saw a lot of different elements that were pleasing, and you try to frame them up and to create an image out of those different elements. But I think in this case, the elements are just they don't go together. So maybe this one's just a miss. But It's an interesting concept of being in the emergency room and looking out through the screen, but maybe just frame up something different.
Okay.
All right. So this one's really nice. I like how you've cropped up the lady's face, so we really focused in on her hands and the little needlework or sewing that she's doing there. Really nice soft light on this. Just a really tranquil image. This is something I'd love to just have hanging over my fireplace or in my study or something like that. Just a nice tranquil image to look at and just stare at. With the light catching the white skirt, really just kind of highlights the hands and frames it out really nice. If I were to do anything with this image, I would tone down the right side a little bit where her hat is. Just darken that just a little bit. It doesn't need to be in complete shadow, but it's competing a little bit for the brighter parts of the image. And I want to make sure that hat stays a darker luminosity than her hands and the needlework that she's doing. I might just tone that down a little bit. And then I know whoever commented last time on the yellow car is going to hit me again for being a nitpicker, but this little bit of debris that's under the green bench on the left side of the image, it really bothers me. I don't know why. Maybe just because it's a bright thing in the dark sea of darkness. I would just clone that out or just darken that, just so we have that wonderful negative space of the bench and the darkness with a little bit of brick pattern being seen. So those are just two little nits, but just a really nice image, really good framing here. I really like what you've done. Was this in like Colonial Williamsburg or something? Or
it was Jerusalem Mill up in Harford County.
Okay.
It was
So
one
this
of
is
our
one of
field
these
trips.
actors or whatever, just sitting there for the people.
Yes, it was one of those weekends where they had live. The man was in the background doing some metal work with the fire, the wood fire burning to do his metalworking, and in another building they had some other craftsperson doing something.
Okay. I almost wonder too, is if you could, if this would work good in like a black and white or maybe even a sepia tone, might look kind of interesting. Yeah, I think black and white would work well, or sepia would give it a kind of an older tone and really play with your mind as though, was this taken a long time ago? Is this, one of these reenactment type places? But as a color image, it's great too. But you might try that and see if you like the more old timey feel black and white or sepia would give to you.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking at the image as I submitted it on my second screen, and I'm noticing that I've actually caught part of the lady's chin and lower lip almost. I wonder if I should crop it down a little further.
No, I think that's all right. Just a hint of the face. I think that crop works for me.
Yeah.
I think it's just all right. Yeah, you wouldn't want any of her mouth. I mean, if you got rid of it, then I don't know. I think I like that little bit of head there.
Right. Yeah, the grayscale actually brings out the tile work on the floor.
Okay.
So I think that is a good switch.
Yeah. So for those of you online, what I like to do, stuff like this, I just hold up my phone, and then I take my phone and I turn it to a black and white image, and I can just hold it against the screen and kind of get a quick and dirty preview of what a black and white would look like. And I don't know if people can see that on my video, what I'm doing. But yeah, I think that would be effective either way there. Let's move on to the next one. Good job on this one. I really like it. So this one, I like the idea here. Obviously, the woman with the red dress really kind of pops out. And I like this one, especially compared to the one we just looked at. Kind of invokes this feeling of solitude. This lady has her back to us. You're not quite sure what she's doing. Upon closer inspection, looks like she might be on an iPhone. So I'm trying not to look at that close and try to put her in a period piece. But to me, I think the framing is a little off on this one. If the feeling you're trying to invoke is this kind of woman having this kind of moment to herself, maybe a tranquil or just reflecting on something, she's almost dead center. Not exactly. But we have a lot of space in the background with the trees and stuff. And then we have a really strong element of the tree on the left. And I almost feel like you need to take a step back and to the left. I'd rather have a little bit more foreground of just kind of negative space leading up to the woman. And so that you could bring, and then you tilted it down. So basically more foreground in front of the woman and less trees and stuff above the woman. I think that framing would give it a little bit more lead in of this kind of dead negative space kind of leading into the woman. And then the area to the left of the tree, there's probably a little bit too much there. I don't think you need all that. You could probably crop some of that off. They'll also get rid of that bright spot on that rock there. Because that kind of creates an interesting element with the bare tree and the woman. She's not looking at the tree, not staring at it, but it does kind of create this, I'm using that same phrase again we use in some of John's show, point counterpoint, with the strong element of the tree, very bare, very strong, rigid lines, and then this woman with some nice, texture and stuff to her dress, creates an interesting element. But I think your framing was a little off. But good seeing on this. What were you kind of thinking when you captured this woman having a little break here?
I just liked the bright red dress, and I knew it would stand out amongst the green. I didn't play with too many settings to try to get the water perfect or I just wanted to grab her before she saw me photographing her.
Sure, and having the I figured that was water or river or something in the background. Having that blown out, that's okay for this image. But I think if you had, like I said, it stepped a little bit to the left and to the back, or maybe even try cropping like that, it will get rid of this bright part that's in the upper right corner, and then you just have all just trees and greenery behind her, and you wouldn't have any competition for bright spots leading your eye away from the woman and out into that upper right part of the frame. So even if I just kind of hold up my hands and crop in a little tighter and kind of crop off a little to the right, a little to the top, even that I think makes some good improvement in the image. But if you've already cropped in at all and you have any more space on the bottom of the image, I'd try to bring out a little bit more space in the grass in front of her. If you maybe have a couple different images, or have you already cropped in tight on this, or this is the original?
No, this is the
composition?
original.
Okay. So, I mean, for those, Photoshoppers out there, you could easily extend canvas and create more grass, but that's a lot of work. But I think maybe something to think about next time of, when you have this kind of image, the red dress is nice, but what are you trying to say? Are you trying to show her in the environment? Are you trying to show her kind of isolated, which is the kind of feeling I get? And if you're trying to show her isolated, having her in the sea of grass with more dead space around her will really add to that isolation kind of feeling.
Okay.
All right. Let's move on. That's your last one.
That's
Any
the
other
last one.
comments on the chat or?
Yeah, Susan, do you have any other thoughts yourself about?
No, I've been taking notes. This is great.
And we had a chance with your pictures, and I hope that's okay, to kind of get into what were you thinking when you took the picture, and what kinds of sometimes when a picture like this, you see the person sitting there, and you concentrate so much on the person that you become blind to the other things around them, and you have to train your eye a little bit and your mind to kind of think about what you're looking at, and then try to make sure that these other things don't distract from the message or the story or whatever that you're trying to carry through. But I liked the two that you brought in here, and I know it's on my review, but I like the two.
You're doing a good job, Rob. That's all excellent points.
Well, the two portraits. I mean, it's very interesting. Just a different way of looking and a different way of feeling. They both convey different feelings, but there are some similarities in the way you've done those. So I'll shut up anyway. It's not my review.
No, that was all excellent. But I think it drives home the point that you can have an outstanding portrait of someone without ever showing their face.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. The lady at the mill was happy to have her picture taken. There were, it was our photography day for the club. And so I have lots of images of her in various, sizes, shapes, angles, whatever. And I know I deliberately took a few cutting off her face. That wasn't a crop to get rid of her face. I did that picture more of a close up on the hands.
Yeah, no, that was excellent.
Yeah.
And I mean, this one, obviously the classic red versus green, the complementary colors. That's obviously very appealing.
Yeah. Well, Bob was stalking her from another position, and I just wanted to get my couple shots and get out of there before she could see me.
Yeah.
Right.
Are there any comments, as Greg asked earlier, from the chat that we need to incorporate? Okay. Well, why don't we move on to Mike? And Mike, I'm going to let Mike talk first, Greg, because he selected these. I have a feeling for a particular reason that you may not be aware of.
All right.
Hi, Greg.
Hey,
nice to see you again. So we've got a upcoming contest with the theme of reflections, and I have hundreds of pictures of birds reflected in water. I was trying to look for things that might stand out as different. So that's what 3 of the photos are about. The other one's one that I had in a contest. I received some feedback. I've updated it based on the feedback. So I was just, seeking discussion about that.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just jump right into them. So this is one I think you were talking about. You've modified maybe a little bit from last time. So this was really interesting. I think when I first saw it, my first reaction was the bottle was too dark with the paper in it. Message in the bottle. That was my initial reaction, and I think that reaction stems from advertising, pop culture, where you need to have the bright image. Your subject needs to be well lit. And so as I studied the image a little further, I realized that was not a good first reaction. And the more I looked at it, I liked the darkness of it. I like that it's kind of a low light, like maybe it's sun is setting, and this bottle's drifting in. And so had it been brighter, I think it would definitely have portrayed a different feeling to it. This one with the darkness and a little bit of color at the top really kind of creates that feeling of hope. We're kind of going into these, what was the photographer thinking? And so having the bottle dark, I think really works with that kind of feeling of, hey, there's maybe a hope that this person stranded on this desert island who's left this message in the bottle or whatever the case is. And I think it works. I think if it had been bright or brighter, or you brought up the shadows, it wouldn't maybe have been as effective. So I kind of like that, and it plays well being a dark element on that kind of diagonal leaning left. Plays off well to the dark element of the wave here in the lower part of the image versus the wave at the top. And you've done a great job framing out the cork in that wave in the background, so it's not breaking weirdly across that wave. It's framed out nicely against the darkness. And I like how you just include just a sliver of sky, just a little bit of color, because if this was a pure black and white image, I don't think it would have worked. So having that color, a little bit of color reflected in the waves, really works out well. So it's kind of one of these things that if you put something like this in competition, some judges may have that same initial reaction that I had, that, well, it's just too dark. I need brighter, needs to be something I'd show on a billboard and be able to appreciate from miles away. But I think maybe a more trained photographer that maybe takes a moment to look at it in a little bit more depth would really appreciate the lighting that you have chosen and the way you've composed this. Because it really, this is something I would print this on metal. I think the metal would bring out just a little bit of the reflective colors in the waves, but even though it's a mostly dark, kind of bluish image, printing on metal would bring out those oranges. And I think it's really nicely composed, really some interesting lines. So what kind of feedback have you gotten on in the past? You said you've reworked it a bit.
Yeah, so in the contest, I think you're exactly right. I think the judge didn't have time to think about it and felt that it was too dark. And I'm like, well, in my mind, I'm going through oh, well, it's sunrise and it's backlit. Of course, it's dark. But so I have brightened the photo, and I brightened it a little bit around the bottle in response to the feedback.
Okay.
And it was really a boring sunrise. That's why there's so little of the sky, just enough to catch the color. What are your thoughts on this slow shutter speed for the waves? Because that's
no, I like that. No, I think it's really perfect because it shows, it creates that nice kind of dark line, but there's a little bit of a rim light to it with the waves kind of crashing a little bit. But I think it really creates a nice kind of just texture to the water to kind of offset the very sharp edges of the bottle. I think if you had gone an HDR and really brought out hyper detail and color on the bottle, you wouldn't get that more kind of somber feeling, that kind of low light feeling that you're going for. So no, I think the waves are perfect. I think you got a great shutter speed. If those waves had been a little sharper, where I could kind of see the foam and the waves breaking, my eye would immediately be drawn to them, and then I'd be drawn away from the bottle. So having it with the bottle being the really only sharpest, brightest thing. I say brightest, even though yes, some of the light on the water is probably technically a higher scale of light on the Ansel Adams scale. The bottle is so sharp that my eyes are drawn immediately to that, and everything else is just background. So no, I think you got an excellent shutter speed here. Just really cool textures in the water.
Great, thanks.
All right, let's go to the next one. All right, so here's a kind of classic scene of a building reflected in another building. And I love the colors in this. I love the waviness we're getting in the reflection with the blues and the little pops of yellow about here. So it's really, really good. And I've done stuff like this before, and inevitably whenever I've tried to take a photo of this, I'm on a blue sky day with no clouds, and then so I have this big negative space at the top of the image, and it doesn't work. But in this case, you caught it either some clouds or maybe just reflecting of something else, that kind of fills in a little bit of detail in that upper right part of the picture. And so I think that was really key to help pulling the kind of tying this image all together with these, very straight lines and the reflections and the colors. So yeah, just a very nice abstract. This is one you could go in tight and make this a pure abstract of just of the building, a part of the building. But I like how you've chosen the wider framing, so I have a lot of different elements to work with when I'm viewing the image. So yeah, really nice composition.
I think I'll get a chance to maybe use this 3 times in abstract, architecture, and reflections.
Sure.
What about, I had trouble straightening the lines, and I didn't want to distort the image. So I just wanted to straighten it. And there are some curved lines in here that they're just there. And I don't know whether it bothers me or not, the way it curves away in the top left of the frame.
No, yeah, I noticed that too, but no, I just figured that's the way the building was. The building was rounded over there. I think since it's a small part of the frame and it's off to the left, to me, it wasn't distracting. I just took it as, well, that's how the building is shaped. But, I'm looking at the right side of the building and the very top of the frame, the bottom, those lines are lined up really nicely. So yeah, I don't think that's a big deal. And if you try to crop that out, you'd end up cropping part of this tower part of the building. And I think that would not be as effective of a framing. I like having a little bit of space on the right of that tower. I think it doesn't bother me.
One of the things I liked about this one, because it's not just a straight, perfect reflection of another object, another building, is it's like it's a whole bunch of funhouse mirrors setting side by side, each one of them distorted. And I don't know why it did that. It's just the way those windows were.
Yeah, and then the tower there on the left, it almost looks like a cross section with the way it's distorted. It almost looks like I'm looking into the building, like it's been shaved. The front has been shaved off, and I'm seeing kind of the center of the building. And that's just the optical illusion, just with how it's reflected. So yeah, I think it just gives me a lot more to just look at, and kind of my eye kind of just wanders around and looks at all the interesting details, and trying to, in my mind, put the building back together. What does the building look like in a regular reflection, not a distorted one? But no, I think it's really successful.
Thanks.
All right, next. All right, so this one, kind of playing the same kind of theme. Really nice colors here. I like the reflections of the different kind of grill and stuff like that. For this one, like some of the comments I made in some of the other photos, think about, what am I going for here? What am I trying to convey? And I think it's an obvious, you're trying to convey an abstract, showing lines and colors and whatnot. And so if that is your goal, it's just an abstract image, lines and colors. I don't think you need this left part of the frame where we're reflecting the sky. We're seeing the sky and a tree and this hot pink fin. I think that part doesn't jive with the rest of the image, where we have this grill lines and these wonderful curves, the plays of the blue and stuff like that. And I think that left part of the image with that blank sky and a tree now that's not anywhere reflecting the rest of the image really takes away from me. So I'd almost crop off that left, 15% of the image. And yes, that means you're going to cut off a bit of this tail light cover over it. But if your purpose of the image is an abstract, then I don't need to see that whole part of that tail fin headlight. I can crop off part of that and still get the message across of the abstract with the curves and the lines.
Oh, that's great feedback. I'll give that a try. Part of what attracts me to this image is that, to me, it's a aha, it's a discovery. It's like you look at it and you go, what the heck is that? And as you look around, the lines lead you to that tail light, and you go, oh.
Yeah, but I'd rather keep the observer guessing. I'd rather crop off, and you can leave the light in, but I just think the little triangular cover that's over top of it, if you lobbed off part of that to get rid of that sky,
Yep.
I think as you stare at it enough, you'd figure out that, oh, that's a tail light. And this must be some sort of exhaust or something in the upper right. But I don't think you necessarily need to be so obvious to the observer. Just leave it as a pure abstract. Let them guess, like, what is this contraption you've taken a close-up of?
Thanks. Good idea.
All right. So this, I'm guessing, is a self-portrait. I'm looking at your little video screen. Looks a lot like you or something. This one's interesting, kind of a classic kind of thing where we're seeing the reflection in the sunglasses. To me, I like the idea of this. You got this kind of stone-walled face, yet reflected in your glasses is this more kind of cheery scene with this kind of bright turquoise color. So there's kind of a little, battle between your expression versus what you're seeing there. But to me, the reflection in the sunglasses, the color is just a little bit too vibrant for me. I think if you had maybe more of a smile or your excitement on your face, that would play well with the bright colors in the sunglasses. But to me, it's more, you have the somber look, and then the sunglasses are just total opposite feeling. It's like a more happy, excited with those bright colors. And so to me, they're not maybe jiving together. I kind of like how you've done a more softer palette with your face and with the background, and then it makes the sunglasses really pop out. But it's just a little bit too radioactive for me to kind of go with everything else. Was there a reason you kind of processed it that way, or?
Yeah, I did make the reflections pop a little. And I never smile for my photos, so, so maybe that contributes to it. The thing that to me is challenging is reflections. When you actually take pictures of reflections in glasses, they never ever look like what you see in the magazines and on the internet and stuff. So I just think they're all too perfect in the magazines and stuff that they've been.
Most of them are Photoshop. They've taken a picture of something else and then Photoshopped it into the reflection.
Because it's really hard to line this up. But I think I'm more infatuated with the trip and the process than I am the actual result.
Yeah, I would just tone down the turquoise-ness of them. So it's not quite radioactive blue. It's more of a bright blue, but just not as over the top HDR looking as it is. But still bright enough to counterbalance with the softer palette around it. But yeah, I think you just turn the dial a little bit too much. You're at a 9 on the radioactive scale. I'd turn it down to a 7 or something.
All right, thanks.
Okay,
right, I think that's
Mike,
the last one.
Thanks for giving us a peek at your reflections pictures. We know what to be expecting in the next couple of weeks, I guess. So, Greg Hockel. Greg, are you there? You're unmute yourself if you get a chance. There we go.
All right.
Still don't hear you, Greg.
You with us, Greg? Greg H? The other Greg H? Uh-oh. He was talking earlier. We know his speaker.
Yeah, he was. Mute it and unmute it, Greg. See if that makes a difference. Okay. Can't hear you, Greg.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. You want me to go on, and then we'll see if he can.
Yeah, Greg, do you want to fiddle with this a bit to get your microphone working, and then what we can do is move on to. We'll try again before we move on. Okay. Well, you might go out. I tell you what. Why don't we go on to Bob, and then you can maybe shut down and come back in and see if maybe it'll click on the next time. Okay.
All right. We'll come back to Greg.
All right. Let's move ahead to Bob Weber.
All right. All right. So the Bob has definitely given us quite an assortment of subject matter here. So I think we just dive into these and talk about each one in turn. Some really interesting stuff here.
All right.
So this one was interesting, kind of interesting framing here where he's gone for a little bit wider shot with this moth. And I love how we have this kind of swath of yellow flowers just kind of on the diagonal, kind of leading my eye into the picture so I can see kind of the environment of where this moth is and this kind of field of yellow flowers. So I know some people might not prefer having the moth such a small, I guess Ord's the butterfly. It looks more mothish to me in the lower left. But I think it adds a nice kind of a different take on this kind of classic photo of a butterfly on the flower. And so I like kind of seeing that in that background. And he's done a good job blurring that out so it doesn't take away from the moth. So yeah, kind of a different composition. I think for me, having the moth being kind of this brown and not as pretty of a specimen to complement the flowers, I think to me the only downside to this particular composition. But Bob, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you were thinking of composing, why you composed it this way? Because this is definitely a non-standard way of composing this type of shot.
Yeah, I was interested in trying to reproduce those kind of pictures you see in sunflower seeds where they're almost taken horizontal and you see a big sunflower in the center and then a vast field of them disappearing. Here, the angle is not right for that because I'm looking down at maybe 45 degrees.
Yeah.
But that's as close as I could get with that creature. He was very close to the ground, but it's that disappearing field of yellow contrasting against the moth that I was going for.
Yeah, it's just he's at such a sharp angle. That flower's kind of not really facing us, off the side, and then he's down at the bottom versus if we had him in full profile or something like that, it might make for a little more interesting composition. I think this little bit of yellow flower in the lower left corner, I'd probably tone that down a little bit, just give him just some negative space there and not competing for my eyes. Because I go to that moth because he's sharp, but then my eye wants to go to the bright parts, and I want to go to the upper right and follow that field of flowers and not be pulled at all down to the left. So I've definitely vignette that a bit and darken that one.
Right. Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, but definitely something different. Like I said, a very different way of looking at this kind of picture. I'm just the moth and that flower. I'm not sure we're in the right orientation to really make this super successful, but points for originality, definitely.
Okay.
Let's go on to the next one. So this one, we kind of talked about this in a number of photos tonight about what kind of feeling are you trying to invoke? Because this is another one where I looked at it. It's not, to me, it's not just a straight picture. It's almost like the photographer is trying to give me some type of emotion looking at this statue of this girl. And I'm guessing this is probably at some hospital or something again. And to me, I think there's a few elements that detract from maybe what you were trying to say with this, this little girl, the statue, and you're seeing the big structure behind her. It's a great contrast to kind of to the girl in the little dress and the red heart balloon. But having this plaque, and maybe it's the engineer in me, I see this plaque at the bottom. I just want to read the plaque, and with a sharp angle, and there's some lighting on it. I want to try to read it, but there's no way I can read it. And I think that's really not part of the image. I don't think it adds to the image, so I feel it takes away. So I'd almost crop that out, either that or just darken it drastically, so it's clear that you weren't trying to make anyone be able to read that. And then we have these two pillar lights on either side of her. And I know that's just part of the art installation to light up the sculpture, but I feel like I'm ping-ponging between those two. So I almost feel like you need to do this as a panoramic crop, a panoramic vertical. So just really slim it down, take out those lights on either side, and take out the placard on the bottom, or just darken that out. So just really narrow, and that would help kind of lead your eye to the girl, the balloon, and just run right up the image in that high narrow type image. And I think that would maybe add to that kind of feeling of the balloon rising into the structure, and the green lights just kind of leading your eyes right from the frame. Well, was there something you were thinking about when you were composing this, or what you were trying to convey with this low angle?
Well, we have a theme this season for unusual perspectives. So this was taken with the cell phone on the ground.
Okay.
And trying to get, as you say, this looking upwards. And you're right, it is in a medical facility. In fact, it's the same one that my wife put up earlier. It's a different part. The one thing I thought you might pick up on is her face is dark. And I've been trying to lighten that up to give a sense of hope.
Right.
And to brighten her face as she's looking at the balloon. As for the plaque, kind of stuck with that.
Yeah.
I could crop it at the bottom, but then I'd crop her legs, and that might look a little odd.
Well, but if you're going for a little tighter, and you're maybe not going to show, you don't necessarily need to show her legs at all. If you got in a little closer and lower, and really looking up her chin, coming in tighter, and then just making sure she stays framed out in one of those structures, and then that might allow you to move the balloon up into an opening and not overlapping with the structure too. And if you got in a little tighter and you didn't have these bright lights, it would change your exposure settings on your camera, and by default then would brighten up her a little bit too, because I think your camera is trying to show the bright spots of the image, and thereby it makes her really dark. If you had a tighter crop where you're only focused on the darker parts of the images, that would brighten that up and make her pop out a little bit more.
Yeah. It's also interesting you mentioned the vertical panorama, because in another part of this same facility, called the Healing Garden, this is the entrance to the Healing Garden, I actually did a vertical panorama of the ceiling, which is very peculiar, because in that image, you have the two floors are actually turned sideways, and it's focusing on the ceiling. But I think a vertical on this would be interesting too.
Yeah, tight vertical would be kind of like the photo we saw at the beginning of the night with the column and the statue head at the bottom. You're kind of going for that same kind of perspective where you have a strong element in your foreground at the bottom, kind of anchoring the image, but then some strong lines kind of leading you up into kind of a negative space. And that would help give that feeling of that balloon rising, of the girl looking up for hope of the balloon, lifting her up. It would really play into that vertical sensation by doing it that way.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Greg,
they
can
get
I
a
ask,
chance to go back there.
Sure, Ron, go ahead.
Can I interject a question to both of you? We've had a couple of images this evening of statuary, which make some great opportunities for lighting and for messages and so on and so forth in this. What is your thought? Are there some rules or something we ought to pay attention to whenever we try to include statuaries or something like that within a photographic image?
I mean, my thought that I kind of expressed this before when we were talking about the building is, whenever I take a photo of a statue, assuming I'm not doing it for Statue Magazine monthly or whatever, where I'm just trying to capture the statue, I try to see if I could portray the statue in a different light or something different, maybe than the artist originally intended. And so, having that tight vertical crop and with the green lights and trying to create something different maybe provides a different background than maybe what the artist originally thought when they did this installation. So that I kind of feel like you're making something unique. You're creating your own vantage point, your own something. You're not just taking a picture of someone else's artwork. So that's kind of my thought. And so this low vantage point kind of does that, but I think Bob just needed to do a little bit more to really emphasize that low vantage point and that vertical lift.
Okay, good.
To make it your own. And so it's not just a picture of the statue. And that's why maybe cropping off the legs and not showing the whole statue, again, plays into that. I'm making it my own. I'm not just taking a picture of someone else's statue.
Well, I don't know about you, Greg, but I'm really interested in the story behind this next image.
Yeah, so this one's interesting because normally these types of heavy manipulated images I do not like at all, but this one I really, really like. It's there's a lot going on. The colors are interesting. I see this as something I'd like to see really big, like 6 foot wide, hanging up in like a hotel lobby or something like that. I think this one just begs to be seen at a really large scale. It's just very interesting, this kind of high key with these little pops of color and these little seed buds. I don't know if I had like, medical stuff on the brain because of some of the other images of the hospital. I kept seeing these bright shapes at the bottom, like it's like a pair of kidneys and some other organ in the middle. I'm not sure I'm supposed to read that much into it. But it's really nice. I mean, they're big chunks of something here at the bottom. But it's got a nice color and swirl about them, and obviously complements the colors in the back. It's very appealing. It's just something I could just stare at for a while and just observe the interesting colors and patterns here. But like I said, I think it begs to be seen at a very large size. So if you were to compete this one, I encourage you to print it out as big as your competition allows you to print, so you can really appreciate the grandness of it. It's very, very, very interesting, very well done. I'm sure this is a lot of time in Photoshop to get all this together. So tell me a little bit more about this one, Bob.
If you hang around afterwards, I'll show you the original.
Okay.
It's actually some yellow roses that are well past their prime and are beginning to shrivel up against a black cloth. And as you rightly observe, the colors have been heavily manipulated using my favorite tool of curves, which I did a short presentation onto the club much earlier this year.
Okay.
And because I know what the original is, I can clearly see the original roses. The outer two are not open and shriveling up, and the other one is actually in reasonably good shape.
Oh, so now I'm seeing that with that outline. You have a rose and then sagging roses on the right and left.
Yeah, and as often happens with these kind of pictures, they're either brilliant or a total disaster.
Well, I
most
think,
of the time,
you have a winner here. I really like it.
Yeah, thank you. Most of the time, they're not really successful. The one thing I was pondering is the lot of little ones, whether they add to it as a counterweight to being very small and delicate compared to the large expanses of color, or whether I should remove them completely and just let the three ones float in space.
No, I think they are a great counterpoint to it. I think, especially against the white background that you've chosen, I love that play of smallness of those and the big and boldness of the three main elements. So, and I like how it's irregular too. It's not symmetrical. It's not the little buds aren't evenly on the right side as they are on the left. It's a little bit more random in how it's played out. It's just really, like I said, it's just a nice kind of abstract pop of color that would make a good mural somewhere. So yeah, I think you need those.
I'll keep them in.
All right. So this is this one kind of reminded me of the yellow flowers you saw earlier, kind of a lower key image, darkness here, and it's kind of nice with a little bit of kind of highlight on the flower in the vase. For me, the one thing that's a little off is that we don't have enough lighting on the base of the vase. It's kind of chopped off on either side. I'd really like to see the bottom of the vase, just the edges of it, just the same luminosity as the rest, just enough to show the total outline. But I feel like it got chopped off at the bottom, so we're coming to a point instead of kind of flaring out as it should. But very interesting image with this low key and the little bit of light on the leaf, and then kind of plays off nicely against the flower, a little bit of top light on there. So a very interesting take on a still life. And so, I like it. There's very verticalness to it. So yeah, just something very different, but I think that base, you just got to bring out a little bit more detail, the shadows there, so we can see the full base. So it just anchors the image a little bit more properly. Still the flower and stuff on the top is going to be the star of the show. It's not going to detract from that because that's a bright pink color. Your eyes naturally gravitate to the red. So yeah, very, very interesting, a very different take, much like the yellow tulips we saw earlier. Different take on a still life. So really well done.
Yeah. I have a version where I cut off the base entirely, but you're right, it's kind of lost. If I look carefully, I can see the base, but it is poorly lit.
Yeah, but I like the green of the base. It plays nicely against the top with the green there, and then we still have some dead area in the middle with the darkness there, and just a little bit of rim light on the glass kind of ties it all together. So I think it creates a nice little kind of top and bottom, having that base there and having a little bit of color in it. I think without
what about that? There's a little dark triangle in the leaf, which looks a bit odd. It's caused by a shadow.
Yeah, I might tone that down a little bit so it's about the same luminosity as the leaf on the right. So just, I don't mind that there's a strong shadow across it, but it is a little bright. I would just darken that just a little bit. I mean, you could take it totally dark if you wanted to, but I think, just tone it down a little bit. Would be all right. I like the little bit of highlight you have on the thorns in the glass that creates just a little bit of interest in that middle of the picture, so it's not just a total void. So that's good. But yeah, you could probably tone that down a smidge. Maybe even on the leaf on the small leaf just above the water line, you could probably do the same thing, tone that down just a smidgen. But I mean, now we're getting into the the fine details.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Greg Hockle.
Greg, you mean we have to look at Greg Hockle pictures next?
Yeah.
All right. Let's jump into
Sorry,
this.
but no. I was hoping I could do that without interruption. So I didn't mean to butt in. Please finish up.
Yeah, Bob, did you have anything else you wanted to cover before we finished?
No, I think you've covered them all.
Okay. Rob, I was really disappointed we didn't see any snake graphics or anything like that. So
there are limits.
All right. Well, thank you. I mean, I've really enjoyed this evening. Let's looking at the variety of these pictures. And Greg, you've got some interesting both color and black and white here, which is a nice mix. So you want to say a little something before Greg Holden jumps in and to kind of introduce this, or do you just want to get him to get started?
Well, I'm anxious to hear his comments, obviously, rather than hear me talk. But a couple of them are my sort of favorites that have gone absolutely nowhere in competitions. And maybe I'll share with you which ones those are after you've provided your comments. And maybe they don't deserve to go anywhere, but they remain my favorites. And if there's ways to improve upon them, then that's what this is all about. So I'll turn it over to you, Greg.
All right. Well, you definitely. I think I have a few tips on a couple of them, and let's get into them and we'll talk through them. So I'll start off by saying this is the weakest of the four. I really like the other three images, and so you'll hear a bit more praise on those. So forgive me for starting off with some negativity on this first one.
Starting off with my favorite.
Oh no! So this is kind of like you've been hearing tonight with some of the other comments. What were you trying to what were you trying to show with the image? What were you going for? And when I look at this image, obviously it's a landscape. We're showing the classic San Francisco bridge, always in fog, and the container ship there on the left. So to me, it's a nice like postcard, like kind of captures that area. It's a nice wide landscape. And it's got some really great elements in it. I love that the white wash there in the foreground and the strong rocks. Like that's really interesting to me. The bridge in the fog, interesting. It's an interesting shaped bridge to begin with. That's why it's so highly photographed. Suspension bridge. And then we got this kind of container ship over there. Add some interesting elements. So you got a lot of nice elements, but I'm struggling to have them tied together. And I think part of the problem is the top half of the image is just all gray fog. So you kind of, the photography rule 101, right? Or number one is, don't put your horizon in the center. And with the bridge line and where the fog cuts off that mountain, you've basically kind of done that, divide the image in half. Okay. And anyone who's been to San Francisco and seen this bridge knows it's perpetually in fog. And so this is how it is. And that's why I started off saying it's kind of like a postcard image. Like we've captured what San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge looks like with container ships and with the rocky shoreline. So I guess I'd ask you to think about what are you trying to convey? I mean, to me, it's a snapshot of this beach scene leading into the bridge. And I think you could do more with it. To me, the container ship, I think, is probably the least interesting of all the elements. Well, second to the birds. I don't think the birds, they're too small. There's not enough of them to really add a lot of interest. To me, what I would suggest is I would cut this picture almost in half and throw away the left half. Make it, you could even do a square crop, where you lose the left pylon of the bridge. We're keeping most of the whitewash, and then I come and take a little bit of the sky off. So you got I'd take maybe a third of the grayness above that pylon on the right and crop in as a square or a 4x5, maybe a 4x5 vertical, and then clone out probably that one bird. So that you have a little band of gray at the top. And then the image, I think, is going to be a lot more successful with the whitewash leading your eyes right into the image, right into these dark rocks, anchoring kind of the middle of the image. And then you have that strong vertical pylon of the bridge, just leads my eye right up into it. And then I end in the bunch of gray space. And so my eye's going to say, okay, there's nothing there. And then I'm going to do a fishhook loop and loop back around, and then I see the other bridge structure and a little bit of mountain or whatever here's on the right part of the image. So okay. I think that would give you a stronger composition. I don't think that tanker car.
Greg, we're missing your audio. Greg. We don't hear you. We've lost your audio. Check your mic. All right.
Make sure you can hear me, right? Can you hear me, Ron?
I can hear you. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
My earbuds were dying on me, and so I dropped them off, thinking it would switch back to just the computer audio. You hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you.
Huh? Interesting. I don't know what's going on there.
I did the same thing, Greg. Sorry, that's why I don't have.
Okay. Yeah. So what I was saying is, I think when we see these landscapes, we want to think a horizontal landscape, and I think this is a case where a vertical landscape would work a lot better. And then I think that tanker cargo ship's doing nothing for you. So I'd like to see that gone. And I think that would make it, to me, a more well-balanced image.
Okay, thank you.
Give me just one moment. Let me see if I can disconnect this here for a second.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's really good.
Okay, I've gone back to my just computer audio since my AirPods. As nice as they are, they just seem to run out of charge so quickly. So yeah, I like this scene of the Badlands, and I've taken photos like this too and entered them in competition, and they just they never get selected, and maybe it's too well photographed. I don't know. This one, it's really, really good composition. I like the grass here in the lower left, adding a bit of texture to the mountains there with the colors. And so I think you've done a great job with the composition here. It's just a nice scene. To me, it's probably not enough to make it a wow image. I think it needs a mountain goat or a lion or something somewhere in the foreground to give something else to it. It's a pretty image. It's something nice. It's one of these things like you take the image, you're like, this would look great printed on my wall. But if you enter in competition, it's just not enough wow to
Okay.
your socks off.
The challenge with this one is, so one, I appreciate that. And the challenge is if you've been to the Badlands, you know that they're not very colorful.
No, you have to amp
all.
them up in post. Yeah.
And this is one section of the Badlands called the Mounds, which is really, really colorful. But
right.
My challenge was there was literally no sky to work with because of all the smoke this year.
Okay.
So the reason I put this one on is there anything I can do? Because to put the sky in and get more perspective and try to get the perspective of these mounds would have been just taken away from this absolutely total worthless sky. And
right.
So then I zeroed in on just the mounds thinking, well, maybe I can do something with that. But I appreciate your comments, and it was really entered to see if there was something I could do to kind of beef it up to really make it a little more contest worthy, only because they were such a unique part of the Badlands.
Yeah, they are. And you do see these bright colors there. And yeah, I don't think you would need a sky for this. I think you have some nice, shapes with the mounds there. And then the striations created by the different colors. I might darken up the very top a little bit where it's starting to get washed out. That would help bring out those the gray on the back mound would pop out a little bit more if the top little sliver is darkened. You kind of burn that in. That would just help showcase that curvy line of the back ridge in complement to the front ridge.
Right. Okay.
But I think it's a very pleasing photo. I mean, the colors are nice. The light on it is nice. On the grass looks really nice. And like I said, the grass complements well. It's like I said, I too have been shot down by judges before with these photos that I don't know why, because I think they're pretty. The colors are great. The composition's nice. I don't know why it's not wow enough for most people, but it's a nice photo.
I'll plug in a prairie dog. How's that?
There you go. I mean, but it's one thing, with photography that you also have to think, sometimes a nice, pretty photo is just that, a nice, pretty photo. Not every nice, pretty photo you have has to be competition worthy, has to be award winning. Sometimes you can just have a nice, pretty photo that would look great on your wall, would look great on the cover of a book or something like that. And it doesn't have to be a wow, knock your socks off, blue ribbon winner. And I think people sometimes have a hard time accepting that fact. I've known my camera club, there's definitely ribbon chasers. So yeah, I think this is one of these cases where it's just a nice, pleasing photo, but it's not wow enough to get the blue ribbon at the state fair. Right. But
Greg, I'm glad you kind of brought that up. And it's part of the problem with photography is that if you are chasing ribbons all the time, you're going to miss some images that really are heartfelt and meaningful to you and transport you to a place. and it may do that only for you. But it's like I call it the America's Got Talent syndrome. You have to scream crazy in order to get selected there, but something that's really nice and meaningful just isn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
No, that's good.
Thank
No,
you.
that's an excellent point. Let's go on to the next one. So this one's really nice. Great choice for black and white to really highlight the tonal range across this image with the white curves against the strong angles created by the rest of the structure. So it really nicely seen to kind of, much like we were talking about with the hospital photo before that had the curves. I think this is what it was Sue, I think it was, needed to probably do come in a bit tighter like Greg has done here on these architectural elements to really more abstract them versus trying to be more documentary with a wider frame. My only thought with this one is, I don't know if you need to see the whole curve of this center structure. I almost feel like you need to crop off just a little bit off the right. Might create a little bit more tension to the photo, not seeing that whole curve. And maybe that's just a little preference thing, but really nicely done with just the whites versus the blacks. Really great job on your exposure and just the lines going everywhere. It's just really something interesting to look at and just kind of stare at and just appreciate the graphic nature of it.
Okay.
Was there something specific you're going for, Greg, with this kind of?
No, it was just this very interesting building that Kathy and I came upon at night. It had been raining, so a lot of the light is coming from lights outside. And I don't speak Japanese. I have no idea what this building was or what we were looking at, other than it was pretty darn interesting and very futuristic in my view. So,
yeah, the only thing I'd say, one little nitpick is this. This walkway or something that's here in the lower right corner. I would just darken that just a little bit. I love the kind of value of gray on the left side of it, kind of going towards the bottom center. I would just make this part on the right, that same value of gray, just darken that right half of it so that center cylindrical column really just pops out. There's nothing competing for it for that white tonal value.
Can you use your pointer to just make sure I?
Yeah. Well, I don't have control. Ron has control. But,
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But is it the what?
This walkway go down and to the right, almost the right corner of the image. That walkway, that area right there, you need to tone that down.
Okay.
To the same value of gray that's on the left side of that same walkway.
Got it. Okay.
So it doesn't compete. It's a little bit of a nitpick, but I think that would just frame it out a little bit better. So that bright parts really pops.
Great. All right.
Otherwise, really, really nice composition. All right, so this one, I think this is the best of the set. I like this one the most. I mean, I'm a sucker for abstracts and graphics, like the one we just saw. I mean, that one was good too. But Cam, we have this theme tonight, this unintentional theme tonight, going of what was the feeling and what were you thinking when you saw this? And I think this one just really, to me, speaks volumes. We have this woman, she's framed out nicely with the pillar on the right and the whatever bench or wall on the left there. So she's really framed out nice. And then you got the white sky and her head's kind of cast down, hands in her pockets. And maybe it wasn't intended to be that way. Maybe that's just the way it's coming across. That kind of creates this kind of sad isolation kind of moment. And you're kind of the voyeur kind of looking into this image. And so this is a case where we have this negative space of the clouds and stuff in the upper left, which really creates a nice balance to the image because we have such darkness with the bricks and stuff on the lower 2/3 of the image. So I could stare at this image all day long. Her legs are slightly awkward positioning. That's the only kind of nit I would have. Like she was kind of not stride, but just kind of bending her knees, kind of a little weird. But the rest of it, it's just really interesting. This kind of feeling of isolation, of a sadness I get from this image. And then of course the stonework is very cold and wet looking. That just more so adds to the image. Were you kind of thinking of those things, Greg, when you saw this, or are you just kind of framing out a subject?
Well, it was probably, truth be told, when I took it, it was more of the latter. But then as I started to appreciate it in post, I started to get the feeling, because it had rained. She was just sort of staring over this wall. So I was kind of thinking, well, I wonder what she's looking at. I actually went and looked after she left, and there really wasn't a whole lot to see there. But because it was quite industrial, those are actually, it's not so much, those aren't clouds to the left, but rather smoke of an industrial area.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. But I just like all the stone and the different directions of the stone and the big blocks, and with them being wet and all. This is one that I've also liked a lot, but it's never gone anywhere in competitions.
Yeah, you've done a good job with the black and white. I know some people might be tempted to either go darker with some of the blacks or maybe brighter. And I think that would be a mistake. I think it is a middle gray image, right? So you have some pure blacks, you have some pure whites, but it is mostly middle gray. In some competitions, I use the word muddled, and I might be tempted to use that word muddled in this, because there is a lot of middle gray, and I think I quickly throw that aside, because I think that adds to this feeling of sadness, this isolation with the wet ground, the middle gray tones to it, her downtrodden face. I think it all just plays together really nicely.
Okay, well, thank you.
I guess we've gotten through all of our images here this evening, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Greg, we have just a couple more minutes. I wanted to do two things. I wanted to ask you a couple questions myself, and also wanted to open that up to folks who are using the chat, and for the other photographers, if they have anything for Greg. Greg, I remember you talking a couple of years ago about pre-visualization, which you use a whole lot when you go out. And I've seen a number of images here this evening, some of which could have been produced using pre-visualization, but then some others occur to me. You also use the term found objects, and that's what a lot of my photography is. I don't pre-visualize as much as I should. So I don't know if any of that wraps into trying to help bracket, your comments here this evening.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I've heard a lot of photographers say that, pre-visualizing is actually a bad thing, because you set expectations for yourself of a particular image you're trying to capture, and then you get there and all the elements don't come together. Like let's say you're pre-visualizing this image, and there's some darn kid in a bright colored raincoat just won't leave your frame, and you don't get the isolated photo that you wanted. And so, I mean, there is something to be said for the found objects, the just kind of coming across something and something pops out at you. So I think you need to be open to both. You go to a site and maybe you've looked at some photos before and you have kind of an idea of what you want, but don't let that pigeonhole you to not be observant, to look for other stuff. One of the photographers I follow is Cole Thompson, and he talks about not looking at other photographers' work, especially work for a specific area that he's going to go photograph later, because he says that it causes him to pre-visualize too much and get too stuck in his head of a specific image he wants to capture. And then it prevents him to being on the lookout for other unique things that he didn't anticipate seeing. So there's something to be said for that. But I think you just need to be open to what the elements come together, and not be too worried about capturing something specific.
Bob Weber, Sue, John Verdi, any of you photographers have any other questions you want to raise for Greg before we
I actually have a comment for John. His picture of the two men in the subway. A little detail I notice is the pillar on the left has the number 5, and the pillar on the right has the number 1, 51, which matches the number of the street station.
Interesting.
It's just a little detail of a sort of kind of symmetry. The numbers
Okay.
repeated.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, if we can go back to that image, that was pretty towards the beginning of the night. So
Right.
way back in the slide deck.
No, that was intentional, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure I'll believe you.
Yeah.
Also-
Okay. Now I see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would expect Bob Weber to find that detail. That's
Yeah.
It's a
excellent.
numbers
Yeah,
thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes those little things are just little icings on the cake. There's
Yeah.
little extra elements to just add a little something to your image
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
really throws it over the top.
In contrast to what Greg was saying about that cable hanging down, I find that distracting.
Okay.
And I would probably, had I taken it, and probably taken it out. Also, there's this one piece of wire that hangs down into the S.
Yeah, there's a cable tie. Yeah, I would clone that out
Yeah.
too. I was trying not to get
Right.
too nitpicky on all the
Picky.
photos, but
But
yeah, 'cause it
otherwise,
breaks
it's a
up
great
the act.
image, especially the motion blur in the foot to give a sense of movement of the gentleman on the left moving towards the one on the right.
It's interesting intention in terms of looking at these images. Scott Dine reminded us in the chat, getting caught in some of the details gets you caught up to the point you don't understand the message, the feeling that you're trying to convey. And sometimes, the rest of us have been taught for contest to clone out that strap and get rid of this little thing here because the judge wants a reason to get rid of that picture and make something else, that gives something else to the ribbon. But it's sometimes that's non-productive and not capable of getting you there. But Bob, you've been trained to look for that thing hanging down into the S, and you can't look at it without seeing it anymore, can you?
Right. Like if it was my image, I would zoom in 400% and to the right of the gentleman, there's like a little white speck on the ground and one on the wall to the right of the little green. I'd clone all that out and do all those little touch-ups. I don't think it necessarily makes or breaks the image, but to me, I'm maybe a little anal retentive for some of that stuff because I've been, like you said, trained by the judges who nitpick little things that don't really make a big difference.
And sometimes you can get all those little nitpicky details out of the way and the photo doesn't have a message and doesn't hang together and that's the big piece that we need to focus on. So, well, enough of my comments. Anyway, did anybody else have any thoughts? Because once we zone out here, Greg is gone for a little while then. So any other thoughts?
There's one just come from Scott I've just seen. He says, isn't pre-visualization looking at a scene and having an idea of what it will look like as a print or on the screen?
Well, yeah, it can be that too, right? Pre-visualization starts with what is the composition? What elements am I including? What elements am I excluding? And then the next step is, well, how is this? What's the final product going to be? Is it going to be a black and white? Is it going to be a high contrast? Is it going to be, super saturated colors? And that goes then into your, exposure settings on your camera as well as what post-processing you'll do on your computer. So, it's all part of pre-visualization. I've lectured before about black and whites. I'll talk about going to some places and pre-visualizing the scene as a black and white. So I don't necessarily know exactly what the composition is going to be until I get there and kind of think about it. But I've already gone to the location thinking I'm making black and white images today. So pre-visualization, I think, can have a lot of different interpretations or aspects, I should say.
Okay, I'll tell you what, Greg, you're probably getting tired. You're on West Coast time right now, so
Right.
give you the rest of the evening. Maybe you can get a beer later.
That's right.
In the meantime, I want to thank Louis and Bob and Mike and John and Susan and Greg for being willing to sit through this. This is a bit of an experiment for us as a club, and we're trying to providing a little more meaningful experience than a contest, although a contest has a lot of value. And I think being brave enough to bring these images in and talk about them has been really helpful. And it's just a good variety, kind of get your creative juices going. So to all the photographers, thank you so much for doing that. And
thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for putting yourself out there,
Yeah,
everyone.
thanks for the opportunity.
and to Greg, it's always a pleasure to have Greg come back to Arundel Camera Club. He's been with the Creative Photography Society. You did a presentation for us last year.
Mhm.
Greg's great with black and white. I love following your stuff on Instagram.
Thanks.
So thank you so much for being here and for everything you're doing for photography and being willing to keep Maryland in your mind as you move forward on your photography.
Well, I appreciate you continuing to invite me. And just one thing, I just kind of a comment to mention, if for those of the people listening, if you find yourself struggling with looking at photos and seeing some of the things that I was mentioning or some of the photographers mentioning, what I encourage you is to look at more photos. Go Google. Sometimes I'll get a bug stuck in my head about eggs or towers or whatever, and I'll just Google photos with eggs and just start looking at other people's work. And as you look at other people's work, whether amateur or professional, ask yourself, do I like this image, and why do I like this image? What parts of the image do I like? What parts of the image do you not like? And that will kind of help you to really start to look at photos in a more in-depth way. And I think that's something that's led to me being a successful judge and critiquer is I study photos. I don't just look at them and say, "Ooh, that's a pretty photo." Next, I take the photo and say, "What do I really like about it? What are the really strengths of this image, and what are the maybe weaknesses of this image that I would, if I was taking that photo, try to not include?" So that would just help train your eyes a bit.
And that's one of the reasons Greg has one of the world-class collections of photography books, because nothing to do better than to sit down and just study what other people has done and wonder why.
Yeah, over 100 books now, and only a couple of them on instruction. Most of them are just portfolios of various famous photographers. And as we were talking at the beginning, I just picked up 4 more books today at the Getty Center, so my bookshelf is overflowing now. So I'll be in trouble when I get home and try to turn the book.
Well, Greg, thanks so much, and thank you also to Mike Thomas and Bob Weber, whose technology made this happen tonight. Bob was like a dog with a bone trying to help us figure out how to get onto Facebook Live. So we were able to do that for better, for worse. And Mike helped us work through some details, a lot of details actually. And lastly, thanks to Pam Treisler, who helped us be able to get this up on Zoom as well. So that's to all of you folks. Appreciate everything you've done. It's the close of the evening. I'm going to try to shut this thing down, and the recording of this should be up on the YouTube site for Arundel Camera Club if you want to get back and look at it at some point. Okay. Thanks to everybody. Good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.